Today I'm driving the last remaining British Army Land Rover Defender stackable air portable LRPV, and it's cold. Now, unless you happen to have been serving in the British Army in the early 90s or been a civilian in Bosnia during that particular conflict, you probably haven't seen a Land Rover quite like this one before. You may have seen something similar because this is based on a slightly more common variant, but we'll get into that in a second. This is a 1991/92/93 air portable Land Rover Defender 90 LRPV, long range patrol vehicle. Now, the air portable version of the Defender 90 was kind of the basis of this car. Apparently, I'm going to refer back to a couple of articles I found online about these cars. There's not a lot of information specifically about this particular model. Around 25 air portables were built. They lost the windows, the doors, the back of the car. I'm not sure if they got this rollover hoop or not, but the idea was that two Land Rovers could be stacked on a pallet in the back of a Hercules, one flat, one at 45 degrees with its front wheels resting on the back of the first one, two strapped down and then parachuted from the back of the plane. These stackables or piggyback Land Rovers were used by the 5th Airborne and 2nd Battalion Para Regiments, but 12 were taken by the Elite Pathfinder Platoon and Elite Forward Patrol Unit, many of whom go on to find out what colour the boathouse is at Hereford. Now, I believe from what I've learned and what from Simon, the dealer who's selling this car, has also learned, that 12 of these were converted into this, the LRPV, mostly by Remy, but also by Ricardo Consulting, an outside agent. But because of cost constraints within the Army, mostly it was in-house by Remy's workshops in Aldershot. So, you know, things like these panniers were probably built from scratch. One particular officer wanted these for his men, and this is the brief that was come up with. It had to carry 3 soldiers, had to carry 2 machine guns and all their supplies. It had to be air portable, and it had to be able to be completely autonomous and off the grid for as long as it needed to be. So it was stripped down to be as lightweight as possible, and then it had as much carrying capacity added to it. So these massive panniers on the side were built and could be stacked with anything that was needed. These smaller panniers on the side were specifically for jerry cans of water and fuel. And this car had to be reliable because it was their home and their survival base for as long as they were behind enemy lines. So it uses a very basic 2.5 litre non-turbo diesel making 83 horsepower. It's slow, but it's dependable. It'll run underwater pretty much, and you can stick almost any fuel in it, so ideal for this situation. It has multiple spare wheels, one on the front, one in that pannier. It's possible a second one, well, a third one could have been added to this one here. There's no bracket on here, but I'm sure one could be added very easily. This comes up with a DVLA as a 1991 Land Rover, and research suggests that these D90 cutaways were based on a batch of 1991 cars delivered to the Army. The works were carried out in around 1992-1993. That's a very loud chicken. Walking around it, you'll notice it's got a few differences from a civilian one apart from the lack of roof and windscreen. For example, we've got a big winch. A Warn was fitted originally. This is a super winch. I can't see a date on it, but yeah, heavy duty winch, so for self-recovery, very important. This big modified winch carrying bumper has been put on the front. This is not pedestrian friendly by any stretch of the imagination. This is thick, sort of 6mm steel. That's gonna hurt if that knocks your ankles. Standard Land Rover grille, that's fairly normal. These light guards are specific to the 25. They're much harder duty. Again, it's thick metal. It's about 5mm on the side and thick metal bars there, so that can whack through undergrowth, brush, trees even, without losing your lights. Also has these big oversized side lights and indicators which are Army specific. Up on the top we've got useful stuff. We've got a spade on the left, we've got a pickaxe on the right, so if you need to dig yourself out of trouble, you can. Also a spare wheel on the bonnet. Not a particular issue because the bulkhead runs higher than that, so you can see over that no problem. There's no bonnet pull to get into this thing. It's good old-fashioned, heavy-duty, heavily sprung catches that you just pull back and release. And with a spare wheel on the bonnet, this is extremely heavy. Now that V8 rumble you might be able to hear in the background is not emanating from this car. No, this is, oh my God, that is heavy. And look how heavy-duty this bonnet strut is. Oh my word. There we go. Yeah, this is the, I'm going to go with Venerable because that's kind. 2.5 litre, 4-cylinder Land Rover diesel, which has been in production since the dawn of time. It makes some power, but seems to have a fair amount of torque and is able to sort of wade these things through deep water, get them out of deep mud. And if it does clog up or something, you can fix it with a teaspoon and a toothbrush. There's no turbo, No power steering, no power assistance on the clutch. There is power assistance on the brakes, thankfully, because this will be heavy once it's up and running and loaded. But yes, this is a basic 4-cylinder diesel. This tailgate is actually pretty heavy duty. It's quite tough, it's got big hinges, and these cables are very strong as well, so it can be used as extended storage, so more cases, more ammunition, more food, fuel, water, any other supplies that are going to be needed for an extended mission, but yeah, potentially behind enemy lines, which is what this thing was designed for. Stepping into the back, we have seats of a sort on either side, and there is one spare pad of seating. We only had a crew of 3 when it was working. Obviously we have our second machine gun mount and a catcher for spent cartridge cases. The car does come with its own camo, so it can be parked anywhere. Yeah, that is basically the end of the features in the back. As well as the big heavy-duty tailgate, we've got a NATO-style hitch, so this is part of NATO UN activities. It can tow anything to do with that. 2 big footsteps, and again, big light guards to cover your large, oversized army spec lights. Again, this is the same heavy-duty, thick steel, so that's gonna, if you need to go backwards through the brush, you can take down a tree with this thing, it won't matter. I've already mentioned these big panniers on the side. They are huge, they're bulky. Sitting in the driver's seat, you are very aware of them, so I'm going to be a little bit cautious taking this down the country lanes around here. And of course you've got your machine gun mount. Now climbing into this Defender takes a bit more care than your average one, because these big panniers on the side are sort of fairly sharp edged, and you don't want to be cracking your shins on that because that will hurt. This is a fairly basic version of the Defender, but it does have a few extras that your regular one down in the showroom won't find on it. For example, we've got a switch for convoy lighting. I'll leave that set off. We've got a machine gun mount front and rear, and a big power supply thing for army related stuff. On the plus side, we've also got mirrors, a steering wheel, we've got a wiper stalk, although no wipers or indeed windscreen, and we've got a horn, which sounds like it may have been in the water once or twice, and a useful ventilation control to get a bit more air in if we should need it. Now, typical of all Defenders of the early 90s, we've got a 5-speed manual gearbox, which is clunky, vague and difficult to use. We'll explore that in a minute. We've got high and low range and diff lock on this second gear knob. So this is obviously it's a Defender, it's a proper off-roader, no question of that. We have a little ammeter. We do have a hinge on each side where the door used to be. Not much else, and a useful storage cubby box, ideal for ammunition and snacks. Now, one thing you're not short of in this car is stowage. There are clips and holes and brackets literally everywhere, because this was a heavily working vehicle in a way that most of us don't ever experience. So little snap clips behind the car for taking something long, round and tubular, maybe, I don't know, some piece of equipment, maybe a gun, maybe a spade, I don't know. I wasn't in Special Forces back in the 90s. But the actual driving controls are completely normal. So we've got the regular steering wheel, regular gear shift, regular accelerator brake clutch, and regular handbrake. There's a big fire extinguisher down by my feet, so there's not a lot of space to move your feet around in here. It's really not built for comfort. This car is for sale at Percival Motors. It's not their regular style of thing, but he does do a lot of Defenders, which is why he's got it. Now, something I've just discovered is that I can't rubber sucker anything onto matte green paintwork because it's way too matte finish. So I've cable tied a couple of cameras on, so you won't get as many interesting views as normal. And I'm hoping that the tripod that I've cable tied to the dashboard isn't going to fall out and lose me my new camera. Right, so looking in the mirrors, which are kind of floppy, you notice this thing is ridiculously wide. I mean, really, really wide. This is like a truck. And I'm vaguely worried that I'm going to take out the wheelie bin and the gate as I go out the door. I also really hope that you can hear me. I've put this neck thing on and put the microphone below there so that it gives you a sporting chance of hearing me over the wind. But I might have to just overdub this. Now, what you probably can't experience, but you might be able to see or guess, is it's very, very loud and very, very, very cold. It's about 4 degrees out today, so this big green jumper is like a thermal thing. And I'm glad I put that on first. The wind is just everywhere. The vents are closed, but it doesn't make a lot of difference. There's no power steering and no power clutch, as I mentioned, so this thing is as heavy as it comes. And with 83 horsepower, it's not exactly brisk either, but it gets you down the road fine. The gearbox is heavy, it's a 5-speed manual. There wasn't an auto option on these. Only a big Nancy boy automatics for the army, thank you very much. But with 62,000 miles on it, I'm not sure how much of that was army and how much was civilian, it still feels as tight as a Defender ever will feel. Which is to say, it's a little bit wobbly and vague, but everything feels like it's screwed on. Curiously, the speedometer is in kilometers per hour. Presumably that's because it was being used in a foreign conflict, or intended for use in foreign conflict. I don't know, or maybe that's a NATO standard. If anyone's ex-army and watching this, maybe you can tell me that. I also note there's a warning light on the dashboard for 24 volts. Now I can see precisely jack out the back of this thing. There's the big camo sheets there. I can't see over my shoulder to make this. It's like driving a left-hand drive car at the wrong kind of junction for that. Oh, you need to bring your hands fairly low down on the steering wheel, otherwise you have frozen knuckles on above the parapet of the dashboard. I'm going to put my glasses back on because I'm getting wind in the eyes quite badly. Oh, dear me. Can't do it. Can't put glasses on with a hat on, it's tricky. This thing's awesome. Van coming, this is going to be awkward. Something just fell off. Oh, there it was. The seat backs fold forward. I braked hard for a van and the seat backs changed. The thing you notice is how wide this thing is. I mean, it looked wide in the car park, but my God, this thing feels immense when you're driving down the road. Yeah, the steering is insanely heavy at parking speeds, but it's okay once you're on the move. Although if you're off-roading this for a long period of time, this would get to be hard work. There's no central rear view mirror because there's no windscreen. There are side view mirrors, but they're on the old door hinges, so they're kind of flexible. And the seats are typical early 90s or late 80s crude Defender. They're just 2 square pads of foam wrapped in vinyl with very little padding, and so upright you're virtually sitting forward in the seat. No head restraint apart from the bulkhead. Once you're rolling, it's kind of easy to forget how much bulk is behind you. It just feels like a regular Land Rover, really, in so much as it's all a little bit vague, a little bit woolly, but that's just how they left the factory. And if you love Land Rovers, you love Land Rovers, and that's just fine. And me, I love Land Rovers. Well, I love Land Rovers like this, proper utilitarian, basic cars that will get you in and out of trouble, no problem. I would love to take this off-road somewhere right now, but it's actually for sale. so I can't go and get it filthy and muddy. This car is actually for sale at Percival Motors near Maidstone in Kent, and you won't appreciate it if it comes back coated in mud. But this car has got a history. Oh my word, that's a massive truck. This car does have significant history. It has been very dirty in its past, actually working for a living. It served with the Paras in the Bosnian conflict in the 90s. And I would love to know what it got up to, where it went, what it saw. Now, of the 25 lightweight stackables that were built and the 12 LRPVs that were built, it's thought that this is the only survivor, because when they were decommissioned, they were stripped and scrapped and parted out, and somehow this one got through the net. So yeah, if you're interested in collecting military vehicles, this is a unique proposition. You will not find another one like it. You can make one like it, no problem, but it wouldn't be genuine. It wouldn't have the authentic history of having served in a conflict. It would just be another Land Rover. And the reason there aren't any more of these is because not long after these were put into production, or built, I should say, the Wolf Land Rover came along. And the Wolf was a full production thing with full army specification rather than just one individual commander. And so that is now ubiquitous. Well, not exactly common, but as this is the only one, far more common than this. Now, your visibility is relatively good because there's literally nothing apart from a machine gun mount to stop you seeing anywhere apart from that left-hand side. Rearward visibility is terrible. You can see virtually nothing over your shoulder because of this big bull bar rollover thing, which is covered in camo, and the spare wheel off to your left means you can't see anything out of that. The panniers block most of your view out the mirror. That's quite handy for making sure you're not going to crack them into anything. And yeah, you can see out the door where the door would be quite easily as well. I'm very glad they've got seat belts mounted in here because this would be quite scary otherwise. With 83 horsepower, it's not exactly rapid, but it's got enough power to put it along at a reasonable lick. But you can see why things like the 300 TDI and the TD5 were so popular after this, because this is not rapid. And if you're off-roading with a full kit, 3 blokes, weapons, supplies for a week or so, this would start to struggle a bit. At least you are very high up in this, so in country lanes where you can't see through the hedges, you can see over them quite well. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this little bit of Land Rovering. I need to get more Land Rovers on the channel because I'm a massive Land Rover fan, at least of the old stuff anyway. And this certainly is a unique example of Land Rovers from the past. I'm really glad to have been able to drive it, and I hope you've enjoyed this little brief look at it. Probably not a very long video because the audio is going to be terrible, and it's going to be a real effort to try and string anything coherent out of the bouncy footage, which I know is going to be bad. But thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please hit like and subscribe, hit the notification button, there's more coming. It's doing no good for my cold. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Please don't hit dislike because of the wind noise and the vibrations. I can't help that.